Hi, Gary Stearman for Prophecy Watchers. Hey, there is a Christian film out there that's breaking all kinds of records, and you need to know about it. And to know about it and to talk about it is the man who made it. That is Brent Miller Jr. Brent Miller Jr., welcome back once again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show.
You know, this film, and it's called Before the Wrath, is literally a record breaker, right?
Yeah, it is. Last time I was on the show, we recorded right before the lockdown began for COVID-19. And the film was just coming out. It was released nationwide on March 3rd, and it just coincided perfectly with the lockdown and people being just stuck inside their homes. And it's incredible because God's timing is just, I'm always in awe every time I see him work. Leading our productions and even, when he wants it to come out. Because this film was supposed to come out, and I've spoken about this a little bit before. Before the Wrath was supposed to come out a year and a half ago. But with tragic events and trials, one after another, just beyond our control, it kept getting delayed. We had deaths of certain family members of key production and post-production personnel, the fires in LA where we had to delay recording the narrative with Kevin Sorbo for months. We had to fly out to New York and meet up with him and do it there. I mean, it almost seems like a movie in itself, all the problems that kept happening. And so March 3rd, 2020 was the date this was finally able to be released through our distributors. And heaven behold, it was such a perfect timing because this was the perfect response to the global pandemic, the perfect response to the fear that had consumed the world about the Lord's return. And it actually exploded in charts and trending all over America. At the peak of the lockdown in April, this was the 4th most popular trending film in the United States, behind movies like Jumanji, 1917, and Frozen 2. And that's
praise the Lord. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
There's an old saying: timing is everything. Mm-hmm. But there's one that I think supersedes that, and that is the Lord's timing. Right. Is really everything,
right?
If you know what I mean. And you've experienced that with Before the Wrath.
Absolutely. We see the Lord's hands on these productions, everything that we do. You have to take your own understanding and never rely on it. Always look to the Lord's understanding and his plan, because he knows everything that's going to happen. And so, yeah, he got the word out when it needed to come out.
Well, I'm going to let you take a sip of that good Prophecy Watchers coffee there, and let's look at the Before the Wrath trailer. And this illustrates, I think, the prime aspect of this film. It gets you right here.
As Galileans, we witnessed his first miracle. He warned us that a time of great deception would come. But we must hold on to our faith that one day he would return to save us from the end of the world.
Most people don't believe that Jesus is coming back. What if there was evidence that proves that this is all real?
Because there were so many people bringing up little bits and pieces of this. I'm thinking, there's got to be a pattern here.
The Bible talks about it as being a mystery, but why does the rapture have to happen? What's the point to it all? A Galilean would have understood that perfectly.
They are the key to everything. I'm just so stunned. I never thought I would see this in my lifetime.
This is the most profound discovery in human history.
From his promise made through wine at the Last Supper, to why the world cannot know the day of his return, we were chosen to preserve the truth until the end of days. So even if we are not spared from death, others can unveil what we knew and believe.
This discovery proves that he is coming back.
Wow. Let's talk about this. This film, this script, how did this develop? And what has it developed into more recently? Let's put it that way.
Initially, this film was in many ways a response to The Coming Convergence, which was another big top seller in the U.S. When it came out only 3 years ago, where we began hearing about new discoveries in the Middle East, specifically the Galilean region, in the field of ancient anthropology, studying first century culture in the time of Christ. And we began hearing about some disturbing statistics and trends that are happening in Christianity in America over the last 10 years.
Yes.
And that's that more and more Christians no longer believe not only in the rapture. In fact, working with Lifeway Research, whom is featured in Before the Wrath, as we were working very closely with them on some of these trends, we've discovered that 25% of pastors in the U.S. reject the literal rapture. 1 out of 4 churches, if you will, across the whole country. Not only is that disturbing, because these are the same churches that are marginalizing prophecy as a whole. They're removing what most theologians agree is about a third of the entire Bible. And as I've said, you can't remove prophecy from the Bible without removing the return of Christ. So, of course, that's exactly what we're seeing, is that 1 out of 4 pastors have removed the return of Christ.
And the thing about Christ, and you point this out so eloquently in your film, is that he left everybody very important clues by way of actions, by way of the last events of his life, and by the parables that he told. He was really leaving clues, one at a time, about what to look for.
Yeah.
And that's what this film's all about.
Yeah, it really is. What was discovered over 10 years of research is that Christ spoke to his Galilean disciples literally with the Galilean syntax of what they understood culturally, which Jesus did that with everybody. Parables, stories, to kind of give us a look into the nature of God and the things of heaven, so he could relate to us the truth. And when he spoke to his disciples, he didn't just speak to them on a general level. He spoke to them as Galileans, and that's super important. I'm sure a lot of people are like, well, they're Jews. Well, yes, they are. Well, why does that make a difference? Because the Galilean culture was a subculture in Israel. They did some things that were different than what any of the other Jews did, especially in the religious epicenter of Jerusalem. I think even what you pointed out on the last show is that even when Peter was in the midst of denying Christ 3 times, they came up to him and said, hey, aren't you one of those Galileans that were Jews? So there was a difference, and they saw that. So in Matthew, when the disciples went to Jesus and said, tell us about the signs of the end and your return, he answered them, but he answered them with their understanding with the Galilean culture. And that's the piece of the puzzle that we've been missing. And with these new discoveries and looking at it through the lens of what his disciples heard and understood, literally reveals the truth of the rapture and why it's real.
And you need to see the film. What can I say? Let's go to the next step. You have experienced this success, and you're moving to the next step, and that's exciting.
Yeah, very much so. We're rolling in the vast majority of all the sales that we've seen from Before the Wrath into new productions, and we're already planning scheduling time on new film sets, and we're moving right ahead because time is short, and there's other topics to talk about too.
You know, you have brought a trailer that we're going to look at here, and I just brief us a little bit.
Yeah, it's I brought a 10-minute preview, unedited section from the film. And what it is, it presents one of the first discoveries that were made about the correlation between what Jesus said at the Last Supper to his Galileans when he offered them a cup of wine, and what the Galileans actually heard and understood so clearly that we have forgotten over the last 2,000 years from their own cultural practices.
So this adds a little more information to what we commonly call the communion, the Last Supper. But now you've taken it a little bit farther down the line, making it more understandable in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We dive very deep into the anthropological view, that culture, and what Christ meant when he explained these things to his disciples, and what they understood actually pierced so deeply with their culture that they understood it on a level that I think most of the church today doesn't comprehend. And this film, even though it goes through to the rapture and the end of days, it's one of those productions that builds and gets more intense all the way to the very end. And this 10-minute preview is near the very beginning, but you can see it already begins to open the eyes to what Jesus really meant when the Bible says we are the bride of Christ and to wait for his return.
If we have ever lived in a day when people need to have the gospel brought right down to the point that it affects their heart and their emotions, this is that day. And let's look at that trailer right now.
Welcome to the town of Cana. Israel's now under Roman control, ruled by Tiberius Caesar, and under his cruel authority, life is harsh for many of the Jews. But on this day, there's hope for the future, a promise for a new beginning, because on this day, a betrothal between a young groom and his bride is taking place.
I don't think it's possible to overstate how important a wedding is in the Middle Eastern culture today, as it was in that day, the first century. A wedding was the most important event that would take place in any town for anyone.
In fact, as word spread throughout the streets that a betrothal was taking place, everyone who was able would rush to the main gate to witness it.
Everything took place at the gate, and this was really, really important because this is where you found the elders. The elders ratified legal agreements, and if you held the ceremonies near the gate, you would have layers of people that would gather around who are maybe not family members, maybe not friends. So you see, having wedding guests the way we have them today wasn't important to them. They wanted witnesses because you can't make a covenant without having witnesses to ratify the covenant.
There is a written proposal that is presented. It is a written covenant of marriage that the bride accepts.
They would be asked, do you agree on these terms? They would say, we do, which means that they can't go back on it. They can't say, I didn't know that was in there, or those terms were disagreeable to me.
After the agreement outlining the union between the two families was publicly read, gifts were then exchanged, with the most extravagant going to the bride. In fact, contrary to popular belief, a dowry, or the price that was paid to the bride's father in Galilee, was not a purchase of the bride as property as it was with surrounding cultures in the Middle East, but rather an insurance policy that would help take care of her if anything were to happen to her beloved. But what comes next will set in motion a sequence of events that will shape the future for generations to come.
Then it focuses down onto the moment where everyone holds their breath. What happens is the bridegroom is then handed a pitcher of wine.
The groom then pours wine into a ceremonial cup that will be offered to his desired bride-to-be.
And it was called the cup of joy. With both hands, reverently and respectfully and fearfully, he would pass it to his bride.
When the groom presents the cup, she now has the choice as to whether or not she will accept or reject this proposal for marriage.
The moment the cup is handed to the bride, she's given all power to stop the wedding by pushing the cup back and rejecting the bridegroom.
Contrary to all other wedding customs in the Middle East, the bride in a Galilean wedding possessed the final authority. She alone had the power to accept or reject the offer from the groom. The betrothal could not be completed without her willing acceptance to drink from the cup of wine. But on this day, during this betrothal, the bride accepts. The groom will then also take and drink from the cup, solidifying the new covenant. But then he says something truly profound.
And then the bridegroom says publicly, so everyone can hear, "You are now consecrated to me by the laws of Moses, and I will not drink of this cup again until I drink it anew with you in my Father's house."
But to understand why this phrase is so profound, we must look at another act recorded later in the Scriptures. During the Last Supper, Jesus offered a cup of wine to his disciples to signify a new covenant with them. And after his disciples drank from the cup, Jesus then said something similar to what a Galilean would have heard from their own weddings. He said,
"But I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom."
This is exactly why when he gave them the cup, he actually says, "This is the new covenant in my blood. I'm about to pour my blood." It's a promise. We're going to be together again, and we're going to mark it by drinking the wine. It's something important.
The breaking of bread and offering of wine, these acts were to form a new union, a new promise meant to deliberately set in motion events of unimaginable importance.
In my Arab culture, you eat from the same bread and you drink from the same cup. The thought is that that which is in you is in me. It is a common union, communion, no longer two, but one. When Jesus says that at that Last Supper, this is my body given for you, broken for you. He is talking as a bridegroom to his bride. When he says to them, this is the cup of my blood in the new covenant, that's how they would seal the betrothal in the ancient wedding.
Well, when you think about the Galilean disciples, they understood exactly what it was saying regarding these things. They were familiar things.
The illustration was entirely clear to them. When Jesus said that, his Galilean disciples at the Last Supper heard only one thing: wedding.
In fact, this might explain why later in the gospel records, the disciples asked Jesus only when the events of the last days would take place, and not why. Because as Galileans, they likely had already made the connection, especially given Jesus' first recorded miracle, which took place in the town of Cana, when he turned water into wine at a Galilean wedding.
And I find this most fascinating, that the first miracle Jesus ever performed was at a wedding. And that wedding had the same cultural dynamic that Jesus was describing when he was explaining to his disciples about his soon return.
Well, there it is. What can I say? Let's go back to Brent. Now, I'd let him wrap up what he's doing and where he's going from this point.
Well, in regards to Before the Wrath, the reason why this film is so crucial at this point is because, just to let you know, based on another study that we were looking into, almost 50% of all self-proclaimed Christians in the United States no longer believe that Jesus is coming back soon or at all. They don't think that anything's going to happen in their lifetime. So the church has become complacent. And you know, this is a frightening thing, because the church, whom we're supposed to be watching for the signs, we're supposed to be occupying as a pure bride, as the bride of Christ, waiting for his return. And the church is no longer doing that. They don't discuss prophecy. They don't discuss the return of Christ. They don't discuss the rapture. And also what we present in the film, and it's really kind of one of the more terrifying points of the film, is that when you marginalize prophecy from the Bible, you remove the very thing that proves to the non-believing world that the Bible is from a divine source. Because no other religious text in the world has prophecy woven in like the biblical scriptures.
That's true.
So if you remove prophecy from the Bible, well, you're placing the Bible on par in the eyes of the unbelieving world with all the other religious books that are there. So why would they believe the Bible over anything else, Hinduism? And so what you have is this deception, this falling away, not only within the church itself, because the church is not teaching prophecy, so Christians are falling into apostasy. They're falling away because they don't know what makes the Bible, and the non-believing world doesn't know why they should believe it in the first place. That's why right now in the U.S., 1 out of 4 millennials are non-religious or atheist. Let that sink in. That's terrifying, because that's the trend happening now.
Well, they've been taught that quote-unquote religion is irrelevant.
Right, yeah, that there's no rational basis for it. But what Before the Wrath does is prove that there is a rational basis for it. And there's a rational basis of why Jesus has to come back at the end of days, and that's the point, why he has to.
Yeah, and let's make the point even stronger, and that is that you go back in history and you look at history and customs. that Jesus used to illustrate what he was going to do. And I don't think anybody else has done that in that way before.
Yeah, it's really looking at the Bible through, kind of through the study of apologetics, like what Paul did in the first century when he reasoned in the synagogues. And that's something that the church has forgotten to do. And so our films, we're really a Christian apologetics production company. So films like Before the Wrath, we don't just tell you the way it is, we're really speaking to the non-believer. It's a powerful ministry tool on why these things are true.
And they are true. And we at Prophecy Watchers have been saying that for so long. How long can you say Jesus is coming soon until everybody says, oh, I've heard that a million times? He's coming soon. Mm-hmm. But not only that, there is biblical proof of that fact. And this film goes a long way to emphasize that fact. By the way, we have here an offer I think that you will love. We have for $25 Before the Wrath. What can we say about this film? It's been super successful. The Lord has taken it into places maybe you didn't even think it would go, right?
Yeah, it's been a phenomenal success, and quite frankly, it's allowing us to move quickly into other productions that begin this year as well.
And with that, we have the final prophecies, an earlier production. We have the coming convergence. And as we love to do, we love to put things together in packages here. Can we still believe in the Rapture? By Ed Hines and Mark Hitchcock. A book that simply defines the rapture. Plain terms, simple terms, lets you know what all the fuss is about. And really there is no fuss. The rapture is logical, it is simple, it's straightforward, and it is illustrated not only in text, but as you have so beautifully portrayed it, it also is illustrated in the actions of Jesus. Mm-hmm. So you have the emotion, you have the text, and we've put all this together in a package. And a little bonus here, Rapture Q&A with myself, J.D. Farag, Billy Crone, Tommy Ice, Andy Woods. This whole package, the Rapture and Wrath package, yours for a gift of $60, shipping included anywhere in the United States. And I think that if you have a curiosity, if you want to have discussions with friends, this package is going to give you an excellent starting place. And Brent, we have just a few seconds left. Where from here? What are you going to be doing?
Well, we begin production on a new film called Eating with the Enemy, which dives even deeper into the Last Supper and the interactions between Jesus and Judas. We begin production towards the end of the year.
Wow. It's just going to keep on coming, friends. Thanks for coming, Brent. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
I'm Gary Stearman. Hey, you keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter, or follow us at facebook.com/prophecywatchers.